This is the studio. This is my street, which looks a little bit like something that the army left behind, but inside it's rather different. A kind of triangular TARDIS, where you squeeze back towards the bathroom in the corner and upstairs, and there's a lovely skylight. It's cosy, small, and a slightly odd geometrical shape. These are my marble papers, and this is the work that I've been doing over the last 9 weeks. There are about 30 of these large, very horizontal collages, which all stem from a period of residency in Kyoto last year, and I'll show you them in detail. We'll just walk to the back of the studio. I think my main observation about this time is there's been nothing unusual in working alone quietly. My modus operandi is increasingly centered on silence and solitude in a really positive way. I've hugely missed people, but I've hugely loved the time of work. And whilst we're here, these are the materials. If there are any bibliophiles, look away now. This is a horror moment where I've been tearing up beautiful Japanese books, chalk pastels, oil pastels, inks, wax crayons, and then we'll come on to the other stuff a little bit later. As you can see, I kneel while I work. I really like being centered on the ground and bending over the work itself. It gives me a kind of intimacy with the surface and a disability to step back from what's going on, which really suits me. There are themes I want to tackle particularly today. One is an increasing acceptance of the waves of mesmeric highs that long, productive work days induce, and then correspondingly the kind of irresolution, doubt, and fear that creeps in, and how you manage yourself and produce strategies to work around those aspects of your character or practice that are problematic for extended periods on your own. The book, above all others, that helped me in Kyoto and during this long period working alone in the studio is Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Shunryu Suzuki, a classic Zen text, and in it, in the prologue, he puts very well this quality of shoshin. For Zen students, the most important thing is not to be dualistic. Our original mind includes everything within itself. It is always rich and sufficient within itself. You should not lose your self-sufficient state of mind. This does not mean a closed mind, but actually an empty mind and a ready mind. If your mind is empty, it is always ready for anything. It is open to anything. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. When I travelled to Kyoto last year in October and November 2019, I took with me 5 of these beautiful Sanderson marble-covered drawing books with a rough cartridge paper inside, and they became my companions as I went from one garden to another. I think I went to about 50 gardens in Kyoto altogether, and I made these drawings on the spot. And this relationship between an intimate experience, an encounter of a space, not topography, but more a kind of meditative zone in which I disappeared sometimes, was my operational reality each day. So one book, felt tips, pencils, crayons, inks. The drawings were sometimes of a rather poor quality, and sometimes I just sensed when a drawing had come out that it could easily become a painting later. But that relationship between working with the sight and memory, from the very beginning, I knew was going to be important. So these were drawn with the understanding that they will be reworked later in a very different way. An ongoing debate about detail, accuracy, whether I was there to make a record of a specific place or something more evasive, emotional, as I said, an encounter which slightly evaded my capturing, went on throughout the whole process. And some of the worst drawings, I think, are those that attempt to be more accurate, and some of the better drawings sometimes are those which are a bit messier, but capture the place. The advantage of having 5 drawing books is that I had lots of time and I had lots of material in a way to waste. I could allow myself that luxury of not getting stuck and tense with one reading of a space, but could work many times through it. I did revisit the same garden more than once. In fact, there were a handful that I went to maybe 4 or 5 times, and some that I left within 10 minutes. It was a pretty straightforward kind of response to what worked for me and what didn't. I think the clarity of the Japanese philosophy of Ma, that interval between shapes or between words or between transitions of age, or architecturally within forms, the Japanese understand all of life through this concept. And I had seen the choreography of forms across the surface when just tearing out one layer very simply. As I began to work over them, I lost confidence, and it's only really in the last 3 weeks that I've begun to resolve that. And I'm going to show you a lot of the works on the wall, and you can judge for yourselves. Some of them are slightly chaotic, and some of them maybe have come out better. T.S. Eliot wrote very beautifully in the 4 quartets a kind of inverse logic, which I love. He said, "So the darkness shall be the light, and the stillness the dancing. So the darkness shall be the light, and the stillness the dancing." And that sense in these works, that there's a kind of classical order, that I'm seeking a transcendent experience in which the image resonates with a sense of purpose, all the elements working together. And yet there's also asymmetry, and there's unevenness, and there are problematic areas, which I love. I think echoes with that sense that in the stillness is dancing. When I came back from Kyoto with a work like this, I was very reticent about restarting them. And I think the lockdown came at a moment when, having completed the stained glass window, my mind was very much in this process of layering glass and cutting glass shapes and firing and reworking maybe once or twice. Actually, the works proceeded once I took the step of buying marble paper, which I found enabled me to import areas of texture that kind of disrupted the surface and gave it, for me, a really interesting range of colours. I then went on to work on tissue papers, stamping, monoprinting, and the tissue papers, when stuck down, actually become transparent on the Japanese awasagi paper. And that proved to be a really successful sort of import of more textures, over which then I drew with my pastels. There were in fact 2 themes that emerged in Kyoto, and they were somewhat symbiotic. We've got the garden images on the left here, and then in the centre are bathhouse images. So having spent the whole day in these super aesthetic environments of the gardens, I would then, after supper, go to the local bathhouses where you sit naked in the water with your own gender, and it seemed by local preference there was no conversation or eye contact. It was an exceptionally calm and serene environment, which, after a very hectic day of drawing, sometimes frustrations and sometimes just exhaustion through sort of euphoria, I would then go and rest my mind and my eyes and sit in the bathhouses. Obviously, I was drawing all the time with my eyes, composing and looking at the bodies, and getting a sense of this fantastically intimate and interesting atmosphere that the bathhouses have. Quite a lot of things going on in these. They're quite busy ones. As you can see, the torn Japanese books, the marble paper, the tissue monoprints over the top, and some drawing. And then back into the garden ones. The Zen Gardens in Kyoto are not the whole story. There are samurai gardens, but in the Zen Gardens you often have attached to a kind of teaching college that promote a particular interpretation of Zen, particular understandings of the use of the garden. And in Ryogen, I overheard a monk who was talking to me and a group about the garden not being a precious place in the sense that although the stones are very famous and often have their own pedigree and history and have been imported from around the world, the really important thing is that the experience of meditation becomes in your mind a garden that you can then re-enter far away and later. And this struck me as incredibly important in terms of what we do making artworks, that I'm not giving somebody an experience of Kyoto, I'm relaying or telegraphing a sense of what happened to me in that place. And these gardens, in a very real way, have re-emerged in my mind during lockdown and become places that I can inhabit, not literally, but in their essence. This is the Great Regents Canal, and I'm looking down over my familiar route, along the towpath out towards Park Royal, and then back the other way over to Ladbroke Grove. We'll just cross the road, but don't get run down. This is such a nice view. And this time that I've had, the extra time in the day, travelling to and from running, has given me the capacity to reflect and in some ways, I think, assuage the turmoil of the time. So I'm very grateful to the running and the towpath and the serenity of it. This was never really going to be a 9-week collage project, more a little kind of discussion into collage and then quickly into glass. It's taken me by surprise how much there has been to explore, and I'm really not there yet. But when I do get a bit further on, the first thing that will happen will be the glass will come out and be bonded to sheets and placed over LED panels, and we'll get optical colour with light coming through transparent layers of glass with mark making.